Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual program from the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Gloria Duffy, President and CEO of the club. Thank you for considering a donation to support the club's work. And if you do wish to help, please click the blue donate button at the top of the YouTube chat box or visit the club's website at commonwealthclub.org. Please also remember to submit your questions for Congresswoman Lofgren via the chat room next to your screen, and I'll get to as many as possible later in the program. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, the Honorable Zoe Lofgren, U.S. Representative from California's 19th Congressional District, which encompasses San Jose and the Santa Clara Valley, where I live and where I am right now. Congresswoman Lofgren has been a Democratic member of the U.S. House of Representatives since 1995. She currently serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. She is an attorney and a former law professor. Representative Lofgren has most recently been appointed to the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. She has said that her goal on that committee is to uncover the truth, protect our democracy, and ensure that such an attack will never happen again. We are so pleased today to have this important conversation with this veteran Congresswoman about her role on the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack and its potential impact, as well as the state of the country, our democracy, the possibilities for bipartisan legislation, and how to handle such crucial issues as the pandemic variants, the economy, gun violence, and immigration. A warm welcome to you, Congresswoman Lofgren. Zoe, it's so nice to see you.
Thanks, Gloria. It's good to be with you, even if it is just virtually.
Now, you are still in DC, is that correct?
No,
Our Congress
I am in California.
But Congress is still in session.
The House is on recess. The Senate is in session this week.
I see.
Unknown whether we will come back if the Senate is able to act on some things that we've sent them. We may come back on that basis. But for now, we are at home in our districts.
I see. But you're still having committee meetings and hearings?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I chair the House Administration Committee, which has jurisdiction over federal election law as well as the Capitol. And we're having a hearing tomorrow, as a matter of fact, virtually on a renovation project that has been mishandled by the architect of the Capitol.
Oh, dear. Well, we have a lot to talk about with all of your various roles. So let's start out on the January 6th Select Committee, since that's of such high interest and such importance to our country and our democracy. Where were you on January 6th, 2021?
Well, the scene is this. I mean, the Constitution, the statute specifies that the vice president will count the votes. So there are these mahogany boxes, and all of the certificates sent by the states are in those boxes. And there are 4 tellers. I was one of the 4.
Wow.
The chair of the House Administration Committee and the senior Republican, and our equivalent committee in the Senate, Roy Blunt and Amy Klobuchar. And the vice president opens the ballot, he reads, and then he hands it to the tellers. We took turns. So that's what I was doing. When objection was made, which we expected, to the Arizona electoral count. Now, I had been tasked by the Speaker of the House, along with 3 other Democratic House members, to organize the defense of the vote. And we had spent a couple of days, actually about a week, with other members. We decided the people most ready to defend the votes were the Democratic representatives from the states that were being challenged. And so we had met with the Arizona delegation. We had data, we had case law that we could give them, but they were carrying the bulk of the weight. And the objectors objected. And I was the first Democrat to speak in defense of the voters. And then I went into the House cloakroom because the Republican House members, or most of them, were refusing to wear masks. And I was trying to avoid breathing their air and getting sick. So I was in the cloakroom when I heard some noise and turned on the news channel and saw that a mob was attacking the Capitol. I went back out, and it was pretty clear that the members who were speaking had no idea that it was going on, but the situation rapidly deteriorated. Speaker was evacuated. We were told to shelter in place. We could hear the pounding on the doors and the sounds of the mob, and then we were evacuated. And as we were going down the stairs, escaping, we could hear the glass being broken at the other end of the hallway. So that was my on the floor experience. And we escaped through the tunnels over to the Longworth building. And I actually went up to my office on the 4th floor so that I would have an opportunity to connect on the phone with various officials, since I did chair the House Administration Committee. And I could see out my window, which faces on the Capitol, what was going on.
Did you ever in your wildest nightmares think that anything like this could happen?
No, actually, I didn't. And as I was on the floor, my adult son and daughter were texting me, expressing considerable alarm about my safety. And I said, well, don't worry, I'm on the floor of the House. That's the safest place you could be. And they were texting their disagreement. And it turned out they were correct. How it came to be that roughly 10,000 Americans thought it was the right thing to do to attack the Capitol, to viciously maul police officers, maim some of them, and invade the Capitol to try and hang the vice president is something we need to better understand than we do now.
Well, you're certainly on the path to doing that through the committee. One last question about the day of. What went through your mind as you were hearing this noise and so on? What did you think was going on? Who did you think this was?
Well, I had the benefit of having seen the mob on the television in the cloakroom, so I could see that they were Trump supporters. They were carrying Trump signs, and that they had come from the rally that the then president had held near the White House. They had marched from that rally up to the Capitol, and with their "Don't Tread on Me" flags and their Trump flags, and in some cases, American flags, started attacking the police to gain entry. So it wasn't a mystery who was attacking. I had a lot of thoughts, as I was watching it unfold. I was wondering, why are these individuals being repelled? And I recall that when we had demonstrations, largely peaceful demonstrations at the Capitol from Black Lives Matter activists, there was a huge force of that was unnecessary. There was no violence at that demonstration, and there was none of that here. I've learned a lot since then about the management failures at the Capitol Police. Certainly the officers operated with tremendous bravery, and I'm very grateful for what they did. They, I believe, saved my life and the lives of many others. But there were very serious deficiencies in the preparation and the management of the department that need to be corrected. Interestingly enough, the House Administration Committee has oversight over the police, but we have no control over the police. There's an old statute that vests the complete control of the Capitol Police with the Sergeant at Arms of the House and the Senate, and weirdly enough, the architect of the Capitol. And they also dropped the ball.
So just in your role chairing the House Administration Committee, does it have any role also in investigating what happened or reviewing the situation?
Well, we've had 5 hearings so far, basically going through. The Inspector General has done of the Capitol Police has done a series of reports and investigations into the Capitol Police posture, as well as the Inspector General for the architect of the Capitol, outlining deficiencies in their preparation. We will continue to do that, but the charge to the Insurrection Committee, the Select Committee, is much broader. It's not just what happened on that day, what led up to it, who organized it, when did it start, what was the goal, who paid for it. I mean, a very broad look at the participants and the organizers, which is certainly beyond the jurisdiction of the House Administration Committee.
Looking at the enabling legislation for the Insurrection Committee, it seems to focus very importantly on security issues: command, control, communications, intelligence, the Capitol Police, security agencies. What corrective measures can be taken to prevent this from happening again and improve security? Is that a major focus of the committee's work?
It is a focus, but I wouldn't say it is necessarily the major focus. Because of the work we've done in House administration, we know some of what needs to be changed. We haven't yet made a proposal on how to change the governance of the Capitol Police Board, but we do know that the posture of the agency needs to be changed. And there's unanimity on this point. And as a matter of fact, it was in the work plan that was never implemented of the Capitol Police, that they should be more of a security agency than a regular police department, more like the Secret Service than San Jose PD, because that's really the role that they're playing, that needs to transform the entire posture of the agency. There were intelligence failures, not only in the Capitol Police, but in the intelligence agencies writ large. They have a dysfunctional and not a dedicated intelligence unit in the Capitol Police, but they got only scatterings of information from other intelligence agencies. So we need to broadly look at our information sources, and how we credit information that is in the public domain. Certainly, there was a lot of this organizing that was in plain view and yet did not really permeate into the planning by either the FBI, the Secret Service, or the Capitol Police. I mean, you got to remember, the vice president was in the Capitol also when that mob descended. He had with him the nuclear football at his side. So there were failures not only in the Capitol Police, but also in the Secret Service on the risk to the nation.
Presumably interim measures have been taken, that there's been a lot done since January 6th, ad hoc to upgrade everything from intelligence to training to recruitment of the security agencies and the Capitol Police.
There have been steps taken, but I would not be honest if I said we've accomplished all that needs to be accomplished. For example, in terms of riot control at the Capitol Police, they didn't have equipment. Some of the protective equipment had expired and was crumbling. There was no system in place to make sure that the equipment was constantly updated. The officers had not been trained, for the most part, in the use of non-lethal weapons that you would use as a riot got out of control. So there's a lot of problems. Some are being rectified, some remain to be done. We do not have jurisdiction over the Secret Service over the FBI. We do have oversight jurisdiction in judiciary, but I do think we need to take a hard look at how unprepared not just the Capitol was, but the federal government was to the threat that this posed. What would have happened, you know better than I, Gloria, in terms of the nuclear football, and had the mob secured them. It would not be a good thing.
Unbelievably frightening. So this is one aspect of the committee's work, but the other aspect you mentioned and you've talked about, which is who was behind the attack, who organized it, what their aim was, and can you talk a little bit about that other set of objectives and concerns for the committee?
Well, I can't speak for the committee, obviously. We've just been appointed. I think we've been in existence less than a month. We're putting the staff together. We're doing our work plan. We're outlining the subpoenas that will soon be issued to outline, what it is we need to start working on. Some of it has been overt. The former president, was very clear in his statements about what he was seeking to do, which was to overturn the election. He referred to Republican congressmen who were helping him to do that. How did that work? Who else was involved, both in terms of the people close to the president, but also other entities? Were there foreign actors involved in this? There's a lot of questions, more questions than answers now, but we have an intention to get the full picture that we can then make known to the public.
Let's talk for a moment about the composition of the committee, the strategy. Nancy Pelosi's strategy in rejecting some of the Republicans and bringing on Ms. Cheney and Mr. Kinzinger. Tell us a little bit about that strategy. How's that going to work out in the end in terms of the credibility of the committee, the acting on its recommendations, and so on?
Well, I think you need to take a step back, because our first choice was an independent commission. And Benny Thompson, who chairs the Homeland Security Committee and is chairing the Select Committee, worked with his ranking member, the top Republican on that committee, to do a bipartisan bill. And every single thing that the Republicans wanted, we agreed to. And when it was all done, and it was our understanding, and we later found out that was correct, that Mr. Katko, the ranking Republican, was in communication with his leadership. And so the bill was introduced, it was bipartisan, and then Mr. McCarthy, the minority leader, said no, he could not take yes for an answer. And I think an obvious conclusion from that is that he does not want an investigation into what happened leading up to January 6th. When the bill passed the House, and we did get Republican votes to pass it, it went to the Senate, and the minority leader, Mr. McConnell, put it on the basis of personal favor to oppose the commission, and it was defeated. So then we were faced with two options. One, do nothing, or two, do something. And the only thing left to us was a select committee. Under the terms of the committee, there would be 8 there would be 5 Republicans who could be appointed. And they were subject to veto by the Speaker. When McCarthy nominated his 5 Republicans, 2 of them were unacceptable. And I'll tell you why. One of them voted against certifying the election. That was not a disqualifier. He is a freshman from Texas, but we made an assessment that he would work. He's a Trump supporter, but that's his right. But he would work and investigate this. The other 2 members, Rodney Davis is the ranking member in House Administration, that, he again is a Trump supporter, but he would work in good faith on this, as well as Mr. Armstrong from North Dakota, who I've worked with on the Judiciary Committee, who again is a Trump supporter, but an honest individual who would work in good faith. Mr. Jordan is clearly going to be a fact witness. He recently admitted that he spoke to the president on the 6th of January multiple times and in the days leading up to it. And in fact, the president referenced him as one of the individuals who was working with him on the plan to overturn the election. There is a conflict. If I don't know whether he did say he would show up without a subpoena. We would hope that is true. But that is really a conflict in terms of being on the committee. The other proposed Republican said the whole thing was a sham, and was obviously not going to work in good faith. The speaker invited the minority leader to put two other Republicans up who would, they can be hostile to Democrats if they want to be. That's not the issue. The issue is, are they going to work in good faith to get answers? And instead of doing that, he withdrew all of the applicants. Many of us felt that it would be good to have a bipartisan committee. And the speaker did invite Liz Cheney and then later Adam Kinzinger to join. They are super conservative. As Liz said at our hearing, she couldn't think of a single policy item that she agreed on with the Democrats on the Select Committee, which has nothing to do with our task. Our task is to investigate this.
So talk a little bit about the powers of the committee. It has subpoena power. Justice has said there's no executive privilege. Will it be calling high-level witnesses like former President Trump?
Well, I don't know. I'm really not in a position to say who we're going to call at this point. We will call whoever is necessary to get to the truth. My personal view in terms of calling former President Trump is, balancing the trouble that would cause in terms of actually getting him to appear versus the weight of the testimony for a man who has a veracity problem. How many lies per day we used to count up. So I think that has to be factored in to any decision relative to the former president. But certainly there are many individuals who we believe will speak to us and who will lead us to others. Some will appear voluntarily, some will require a subpoena. There are also entities that have information, for example, in the social media world, which, always companies require subpoenas for legal purposes. So we will have a very wide net. And I expect that the former president will try and litigate everything. He's a very litigious person. However, a lot of the deck was kind of cleared on some of this in the last administration. For example, the Judiciary Committee subpoenaed the then lawyer for the president, Don McGahn. That was fought to a standstill, and ultimately he had to appear. So the legal issues being advanced have been quite litigated, and the House has prevailed. And I think those precedents can be asserted to kind of jump to the chase, if you will, on some of these cases.
Are there any other powers or authorities that the committee has that are important to this investigation?
Well, I think the power to get documents and the power to get testimony is the major issue. Obviously, when it comes to compelling members of the House to speak, we may have other means available to us, but that would be speculation at this point. So far, the members whose names have been in the press as potential witnesses have all indicated they have nothing to hide, while also trying to intimidate us into not calling them forward. So we'll see how this develops.
I am getting via text some questions from our audience from the YouTube chat. And one person wants to know when the next hearings will be. Will they be televised? When will the public have an opportunity to see more of the work of the committee?
Well, I don't have a date right now. We decided to open our debut, if you will, as a committee with the video and testimony of the officers, just because there are some members of Congress and the House and Senate, as well as kind of propagandists in the media world, trying to indicate that nothing really happened, which is absurd. And I think if you watch the video and listen to the testimony of those officers who were amazing, you couldn't help but understand that something did happen on January 6th. It was violent, and it was not a bunch of tourists visiting the Capitol. This month, the House is in recess. The members of Congress are home in their districts, visiting with their constituents, and the members of the Select Committee are meeting virtually, outlining our next steps. We're not going to have a hearing just for the sake of having a hearing. We're going to have a hearing when there is something important for the public to see. I believe that our proceedings will be a mix of private interviews, depositions, and public hearings. And we'll have a public hearing when there's something that we have to show to the public.
I watched some of the testimony of those police officers, and I can only imagine what it was like to be there and to hear what they had to say and the emotion with which they said it. What was the atmosphere like in the hearing room when they were testifying?
Actually, it was surprisingly emotional. I don't know if you noticed, I don't know Adam Kinzinger very well at all, or Liz Cheney. I mean, we don't serve on any committees together. We've never been on a congressional delegation trip together. When Adam went to speak, he was choked up, and I didn't expect that, and he didn't expect that. I mean, for all of us sitting there and listening to what these men went through, the assaults that they were hurt, and they went back and they washed as best they could the poison out of their eyes and turned around and went right back out for the fight. And what they did was they saved our lives. And all of us were aware that had they not done what they did, quite likely we would not be sitting in that room. Some of us would have been killed. That was the intention, pretty clearly, of various members of this riot. So there was that element. And, different degrees. One of our members was in a room. I didn't know this until just the week before the hearing, that she had been in a little room that was down the hallway from where the officers were, with tear gas. And what they did allowed her to be evacuated. And it was very, very personal for each one of us.
I just want to mention that Liz Cheney will be with us here at the Commonwealth Club on the 18th. She'll be doing a conversation with Dan Ashley from KGO7, actually in person in San Francisco, assuming that's still possible, and online. So if you have any questions we should be asking her, let us know.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, again, it's not someone I know very well, but I have been impressed that she's very bright. She has good questions. She's got good ideas. I mean, she and I probably don't agree on 99 out of 100 policy items. But certainly, I'd love to get back to the point in our country when she and I could argue about policy instead of having Republicans and Democrats argue about reality.
Okay. We'll put that to her. So what's the practical impact of the committee's work? So it does its work, it has findings. What's the import in law, in public policy of those findings, recommendations? Particularly,
well, we don't know yet.
Yeah, particularly about the more complex issues like who was behind this and, who organized it?
We don't know the answer to that yet, Gloria, because we're starting this journey. We're not at the end of the journey. It may be that we will find things out that the Department of Justice doesn't know. I mean, this is, it's a highly politicized, in a way, not partisan, but it was the President of the United States who had that rally. I mean, it wasn't a non-entity. And so that can't be overlooked. What changes should be made to statute, if any, will have to wait upon what we find out. I do think laying out what happened to the American public is very important, because the most precious thing we have is our American democracy. And I think Liz says something to the effect that we care more about hating our political enemies than we care about loving our American democracy. I hope not. And so the best outcome would be a widely understood on the part of the American public understanding of what actually happened, and a renewed commitment to democracy and to the American Constitution. That would be, aside from any legislation or any prosecution, to me, that would be the most important thing for the American public to renew its passion for the American democracy.
Do you think that, and this is a question from our audience, do you think that what happened highlights larger problems with homeland security in the US, larger vulnerabilities that we have? We're about to come up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which obviously came from outside. But what do you think the current state of homeland security is at this point?
Well, certainly after 9/11, quite a few steps were taken to increase our security posture, to share information among agencies, but that was always outward looking. I will say, after I was walking back over to the Capitol after the riot, and I thought, our foreign enemies saw this too, that it is possible to breach this building and to do damage to the institution. So I think the success of the rioters did make us more vulnerable, not only to other domestic terrorists, but also to international enemies. And as you know, we have them. I do believe that the failure to focus on white supremacist extremist groups has been a failure. And I lay that back to the time of really when Janet Napolitano was the Secretary for Homeland. They were beginning that, and they got a lot of pushback from the Republicans in the House in particular, and they pretty much dropped it. That was a mistake. Because these extremist groups are violent, and they have grown since that time. And they are, some of the FBI experts have said they are the biggest threat to the American democracy right now. So it doesn't mean we can't pay attention to foreign adversaries. We have to. We have them. We've got to keep ourselves safe from them. But a bigger threat right now might be internal.
Another question from the audience. What is your gut feeling about the allegations of Congress members actually being complicit in the attack and providing access information, locations, timing, etc.?
I don't know the answer, and I don't want to leap to a conclusion. Certainly, we will examine that. And if that is the case, that would be a very serious matter for the Congress, for any member of Congress who was involved, as well as potentially the Department of Justice.
Getting back to your comments about how President Trump would probably fight everything and be litigious and so on, one member of the audience wants to know, how likely do you think that he will be held accountable personally in any way for what happened?
Well, obviously, the House of Representatives does not have the capacity to initiate legal action. I mean, an indictment or something of that. That's not a legislative role. We did impeach him twice. And as a matter of fact, the second impeachment found that he incited this riot. A majority of the House voted for that. 10 Republicans voted for it in the House. And although he didn't get the 60 vote margin the Constitution requires, 57% of the United States Senate said he was guilty of that, which is pretty phenomenal. So, the House and Senate have reached a conclusion that he was complicit in inciting this riot. What goes beyond that is what we need to look at. What was he doing all day? Why was it that the National Guard was not permitted to come and safe the Capitol? There are a lot of questions that need answers.
What's the committee's timeline or purview? I mean, how long could it be investigating these matters?
Well, each committee exists only for the term of the Congress. So, I mean, it could not continue beyond this Congress. Certainly, we don't plan to go that long, but we will take the time that we need to get all the answers. And we're going to work as fast as possible because we don't really want to drag this out. We want to get to the chase.
How are your fellow members of Congress and you yourself dealing with the trauma of having been through this experience on January 6th? And if not for some protection, potentially having lost your lives?
Well, I think different people, we're all different in our physiology has us reacting in different ways. I know that some members, I think, are really continuing to get a therapy for the trauma that they experienced. And I give them credit for that. If you need medical care, you should get medical care. So that is a good thing. I tend to be fairly even in my demeanor, although my husband insisted that I was more traumatized than I let on. And I think he was right in terms of when I first saw the videos afterwards, it did have a call out, a very emotional response to me. But I think I have, by continuing to watch, desensitized those reactions. And so I'm just moving forward. The police officers involved had varying responses. We've had a number of police officers have taken their own lives. And whether or not you can draw a direct line, obviously you never know what's going on in the lives of individuals, but certainly that so many officers were subject to that tremendous abuse and trial, we can't ignore. We know that hundreds of officers were injured, and the psychological injuries may not have been as well diagnosed as the physical. People lost eyes and fingers and had other damage that is permanent. But I think everybody who went through that has some little stab that they've got in their heart.
You mentioned holding the hearings early on to really remind people that something actually happened. And I certainly marvel, as I'm sure you do, at the current ability to deny facts and reality and have a different interpretation of a completely different interpretation of things that have happened. And sort of going back into how our country is educating people, how people are consuming media, to arrive at a place where they think that things that happened didn't happen or whatever, whether it was the Holocaust or whether it was what happened on January 6th. What do we need to do in this country, whether it's in civics education or how media is available and consumed? What do we need to do to sort of establish a better base for our citizenry in understanding, participating in, and appreciating our democracy and our civil society?
Well, I think, Gloria, it's not just civics education. There's a psychological aspect to this that we need to better understand. In some cases, it's just, well, let me give the example of one member of Congress who said, it looks like just a bunch of tourists. Well, he actually, during the riot, was on the floor helping the Capitol Police to push furniture up to the door so the rioters couldn't get in. He must know that he's lying because he was there. I've seen a picture of him there. I've seen the tape of him saying it looked like tourists. He's a liar. But there are people, in the public broadly who are thinking that what that liar said is true when it's a complete falsehood. And the question is, how do we have a common reality? I do think, I thought it was a positive that apparently Fox News, whose media stars and entertainers are trying to pretend that this really didn't really happen, that the officers were actors. I mean, really absurd things that they're saying. But the news division actually ran the hearing so that Fox News viewers would see the videotape, the officer's testimony. And I think if you saw that, it would be hard to conclude that nothing happened. I do think we've got to better understand the role of propaganda. It's not new. There's been propaganda through the ages. How is a complete lie sold to the American public or any public? This is happening in other countries as well, so that reality is distorted. And that's not, I'm for civics education, and it was my favorite class in high school, and every kid ought to have a copy of the Constitution and read it. But that's not the only problem we have here.
So it's a lot of responsibility is incumbent, I think, on the media to counteract, report correctly, seek truth, fact check what is out there from other media.
I think that's correct. And I think the role of social media in particular, not just social media, because broadcast media has played a role in this as well, in terms of creating a false narrative and luring people into believing it, and also how that interplays with political leaders. Certainly, President Trump is still saying that the election was stolen, that somehow, and people tend to believe that he's the president of the United States. Of course, it must be true. Making things up, that somehow there was a computer defect when there are paper ballots, and the paper ballots are counted by hand and yield the same result as the machine tally. It wasn't a machine glitch because you've got paper ballots that were counted by hand, and yet the lie continues to resonate.
One audience member says, how do you even begin to have conversations with fellow Congresspeople and some of the folks online today that are living in a completely different reality?
Well, it's not easy. Some of what I've tried to think through and get advice on is, how do you engage with someone who, not just you have a political disagreement with, because we know how to do that, but has a different reality, and providing a frontal assault on their false fact base is generally not very successful because it causes their people's character to crumble. So to ask questions, what piece of information would cause you to doubt what you just said? Would X and Y make you wonder whether that's accurate. And instead of attacking the person as a dummy or ill-advised, because that's not fair to our fellow citizens. People are getting information and they're trying to put together what happened. Let's be respectful and see how we can come to a common agreement of facts. That's the issue.
Well, I know that the work of the committee will be tremendous and come out with great results. Let's shift for just a moment to other things that are going on. After the January 6th committee, what is most occupying your time? Let's talk about the pandemic. I know the infrastructure bill, one anyway, just went through. What are you most concerned about other than this work of this committee?
Well, I've got a lot of different assignments. I'm on 5 separate committees, which I think is some kind of record. And we're doing actually some good things with bipartisan efforts in the Science Committee, especially on when it comes to using science and technology and understanding, detecting, and fighting wildfires, which is of particular interest here in the West, although not only the West. And, you get the picture looking at the news, not surprisingly, that it's all acrimony, all party line votes. Well, the Science Committee is a little beacon of hope, because I think all of the bills that we've taken up so far this year have been unanimous. For example, a huge expansion in the capacity of the National Science Foundation to support science, and also the Department of Energy research projects. We had bipartisan votes on that, not only in the committee, but in the House. That's very important because we won't have a growing economy in the future if we don't have funding, robust funding for the basic science research that only the government has the resources to fund. I chair the Immigration Subcommittee in the Judiciary Committee, and I've been trying for all these many years to get reforms to what is close to a dysfunctional immigration system. We have passed several bills in the House, and they're over on the Senate side now. The DREAM Act, which people have heard of, young people brought to the United States as children. We also did a bipartisan bill that I wrote with the Democratic and Republican lawmakers. It took us over a year to write, along with the United Farm Workers Union and all the growers sitting down and hashing out differences. We got a big bipartisan vote for the farm workers in the House, and that's also over in the Senate. We've done working on the president's proposal, the U.S. Citizenship Act, which is very big and very important. And we haven't been able to produce that, but it does. We're not competing successfully for the most highly skilled scientists who are foreign born. We've had several hearings on it, but we've got people with postdoctoral degrees, but because they were born in India, they're facing a 20-year wait for a permanent resident card, and they can get the equivalent permanent card in Canada in less than 6 months. There's a reason why the Toronto tech economy is growing faster actually than Silicon Valley's, and it's immigration. So we need to do some important things to make sure that we are serving the American economy well, that we're building American jobs and not pushing them to other countries. We met with the president last week, myself and some other House and Senate members, on whether we could put some of these provisions in the reconciliation bill that's being discussed. And the president was very, very welcoming on that. He said he was all in. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get some of this done in the reconciliation process. Obviously, the COVID situation is not what we want it to be. This variation has set us back. The role of the Congress has primarily been to make enough resources available to the private sector that we don't have even more economic damage before we get through to the other side, in addition to making sure that we have vaccines and testing and the like. It's disappointing to me that so many Americans have failed to take advantage of the vaccine, which is, the benefit that we have from that the science research that has gone on to give us that opportunity, and that some people would not avail themselves of that opportunity and become little petri dishes for additional variants to grow, is really disappointing. It hurts their health, but it also damages and threatens the health of everyone else. So, we can't the federal government can't require everyone to take a vaccine, but certainly the private sector is stepping forward. I know many of the companies here in Santa Clara County are saying, if you want to come back to work, you have to be vaccinated. And what I'm hearing from not just companies, but from workers, is they don't want to go back to work unless they know their coworkers are vaccinated. They don't feel that's fair to them. So I think we'll get there, but it's taken longer than it should have.
We actually surveyed both our staff at the club and our members and constituents, and that's exactly what they said, that they would feel comfortable coming back when they knew everyone else was vaccinated. So we have had a vaccine proof of vaccination check, as well as a mask requirement and distancing requirement for any events at the Commonwealth Club. So we're not changing anything because we've been there all along, and we feel that's prudent and it's a good example to set. Are there any levers for the federal government with vaccine mandates? Is there anything?
Well, as the federal government as an employer can require vaccines, and the president has indicated an indication to move in that direction. Certainly the VA, like most other hospital systems, is going to require its personnel to be vaccinated. For those who think that it's appropriate for a physician or a nurse to be unvaccinated in a hospital, I just don't get it. You don't have to be vaccinated, but if you want to work in the VA, you do. There can be reasons why someone for a health reason can't be vaccinated. In those cases where possible, you need to accommodate them through remote working. But the vast, vast majority of those who've refused vaccination just don't want to do it. And, we can't make them, but if they don't want to do it and they want to work in a nursing home or in a hospital, they're going to have to find a different line of work.
Switching for a second to the infrastructure bill, what are the greatest victories in what's contained in the current version of the infrastructure bill?
Well, I guess the most amazing thing is that we have both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate working on the same bill. The scope of the bill is far short of what we had in the House version, and there will be a need to bring the parties in the Senate and the House together after the Senate finishes its work. In the House bill, it was a green bill. I mean, in addition to transportation, we recognized in the House that you can't just keep pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. This is, the majority of greenhouse gases in the United States come from the transportation sector. We need to take advantage of the opportunity to completely change that. And our bill did move us in that direction. The Senate bill is much less ambitious in that regard. The other thing in the Senate bill is very little for public transit. The House had a robust public transit element, and we're not willing to just do highways. I mean, we have to have public transit, not only to meet the needs in urban areas, but also to move us away from greenhouse gases once again. So, there are going to be major differences, but I want to at least celebrate that the Senate is moving forward instead of treading water. That's not always what we see. And if we get movement forward, then we have a chance to come to a meeting of the minds. And sometimes I go to schools and I have a little booklet, and it's called How Our Laws Are Made. But I have to say, well, this is how the laws are supposed to be made. And that involves what's called a conference committee. If House and Senate do different bills, and you get together and you come up with a conference committee and you work out your differences and adopt them. And we may actually have something like that for the transportation bill. That would be a treat.
This may be unfair to ask, but you probably can guess where it comes from. No high-speed rail in the among the public transit options in the bill?
That's correct. Now, California did get the money for high-speed rail back that the Trump administration wrongfully took away. And there isn't a big push on high-speed rail, as you've noted in the bill. That doesn't mean that will never occur. But at this point, I think California is busy spending what it got back from the Trump theft of the money, and we will see how we go from there. I do think we need to be aligned between California state government and the federal government on that project. And as you know, there are still planning sessions underway that are going to be key, both entering the Bay Area as well as entering Los Angeles. If those are not handled successfully, the project is in jeopardy.
The sense I get from our compatriots here in the Bay Area, people are a little down at this point. It's been a long haul for 16 months with COVID, the economy. We have a great deal of homelessness. We have, businesses closing and so on. People are discouraged that there's yet one more mask mandate. We have to sort of, pull back to the reopenings that were going on. What would you say to people who are feeling down and discouraged at this point?
Well, I know what you're saying because I feel it myself. This has been a long slog, and I guess I felt like everyone else, it's in the rear view mirror now, and oops, it isn't. So I guess what I'm saying to myself and to my constituents is, let's understand that these things are still within our control. The economic growth, we met with the president, and the growth, GDP growth was like 6.7%, something like that. The fastest growth of any country in the world. And yet the press coverage was, well, it wasn't 7%. It's like, sometimes let's take a look at what we've achieved, not just what we wanted to achieve and didn't do. The issue of homelessness is so depressing. And I think my neighbors and I feel this, everyone does. It's completely unacceptable to have mile after mile of people living in tents. It just can't be. And so I do think there's a huge amount of money that we have allocated to states to get moving on this. The people have complained that the money hasn't moved fast enough, and I think there's some fair criticism there. But it takes a while for large government programs to get rolling. There's a momentum. Governor Newsom has had his hands full, and I think overall he's done a pretty credible job in the face of challenges really unlike any governor California has ever faced, really, since the Spanish flu in 1918. And our economy has survived. Our people have, for the most part, survived. Our growth is good. We're starting to move people out of those tent cities and into dwellings. That's a long process. Our county, for example, just adopted a procedure to allocate mental health services to people who are troubled on the street, so that cannot continue to be ignored. So we're getting there. It's just depressing that we're not there yet. I know exactly how people feel. I feel it myself. That's one of the reasons why I think you have members of Congress going home to their districts. Being a representative is not just reading the letters of your constituents and responding, but being home with them and feeling the same thing they do and getting the energy that from them to get answers and changes that are necessary.
So you've really answered this in part, but this is coming from our audience and probably will be our last question here. For you personally, in the midst of the negativity these days, what keeps you going in this job? How do you overcome any pessimism you feel?
Well, I think, I'm someone who I tend not to give up. And what I've learned over the years is if you never give up, things happen. People who say that nothing can happen turn out to be wrong. And there's a reason for it. I have grandchildren who just turned 6, and I think about them a lot and what kind of future they will have and their classmates. All of us are in this not for ourselves. Frankly, at our age, the next century is not going to be here with us. It's the young children who have to have a free country that's still a democratic country, that has an environment that is suitable for human life, an economy that allows them to prosper and live decent lives. That's what it's about. And one of the things I learned as a mother is you can't, I brought my kids to school and I realized I couldn't just have them have a good life. If their classmates were living in fear and in poverty, and that would infect my children. Really, to have a safe community, you have to look at the whole community, not just your own family. And that's why I'm in public life. I'd just like to thank you personally for your leadership on this select committee.
I worked with Congress in different ways over the years, including as a member of the executive branch, but I was so impressed when I showed up for my internship with a member of the House after my sophomore year of college. That was Don Regal, long gone from Congress. And I went to the Capitol building, I toured around, I looked at all of, the House floor and the Senate floor. And when the insurrection, when the attack occurred, I cried. This was just the citadel of democracy, the very center of the people's house and democracy. And so that was such a terrible event, such a traumatic event. And I can only imagine how it affected you. And so thank you for what you're doing to get to the bottom of this and take steps to make sure it can never happen again.
Well, Gloria, thank you for that. And really, it's worth keeping in mind that we were really just inches away from the government being overthrown. It sounds hyperbolic, but had the electoral college boxes been captured and destroyed, the peaceful transfer of power would have been disrupted, and our normal democratic governmental processes would have been disturbed or eliminated. So it's not just the feelings we have for the building as a symbol, but the great passion we have for the freedom we enjoy, which is really based in our constitutional democracy. And that's what's at stake.
Thank you for being on the front lines of defending our Constitution and our democracy. We are at the end of our time now. I really want to say a big thanks to Zoe Lofgren, U.S. Representative from California's 19th Congressional District. Thank you for your strength and your tenacity and for standing to protect our democracy. Thank you also to all of our viewers. I'm Gloria Duffy, and now this virtual program of the Commonwealth Club of California is adjourned.